as well as providing some of the best adaptations of comic book supervillains. The shows of the DC animated universe were responsible for creating some brand new villains of their own. While the majority of these original villains would go on to appear in the comics with minor roles, such as Livewire and the Condiment King, some of the villains, like Harley Quinn, went on to become huge pillars in DC Comics' empire. And then there's a small subset that have had appearances so minor that they may as well have not happened at all. One such villain is the subject of today's video, the pyrokinetic Volcana. Now before we begin, I would like to point out that there was already a one and done Superman villain named Volcana in the comic books, but she was an apocalyptian who could spew lava from her mouth. They're very clearly not the same person, and the fact that they share a name is likely just a coincidence, and perhaps a bit obvious for a woman with fire-based abilities given that her name is just a feminized version of the word volcano. The DCAU's Volcana had the ability to create and control fire, and she uses her powers to aid her in robberies. Like many of the original DCAU characters that were created to fight Superman, her powers are elemental. And it's no coincidence that these new Superman villains had powers that were energy or element based. For instance, Livewire had electricity based powers, Luminous had light powers, and Volcana has fire powers. The forces that their abilities represent are powerful, unpredictable, and potentially dangerous in the wrong hands, which makes them the perfect foe for Superman. Volcana made her first appearance in the episode Where There's Smoke. This is a reference to the expression "there's no smoke without fire," which means that if there are rumours about something, then chances are it's at least partially true. She continues the rich DCAU tradition of being a tragic villain, incredibly attractive, but still tragic. As a teenager, Claire Selton was sent to an institution for the gifted to help her control her abilities. Her parents couldn't deal with her and sent her to the institution, saying that she should trust that this was what was best for her. At this school for the gifted, which was funded by the government to train and potentially weaponize paranormal people, she learned to harness her powers. But she was taken away by the head of the agency, a man known only as Kurt, and used as a weapon as part of Project Firestorm. Not to be confused with the hero of the same name, although I can definitely see a slight resemblance between Volcana and Firestorm, mainly the flaming hair. The staff at the institute knew what was going to happen to her, and yet they did nothing to protect her. Their argument was that they needed that government funding to help the others, the people with less deadly powers, and sacrificing Claire was the price they had to pay. They never forgot her though. This isn't the first time that the writers of the DCAU have been critical of shadowy government agencies. Just look at Project Achilles, where the military dedicated a lot of resources towards finding a way to defeat Superman. As I alluded to in an essay about how Superman's presence completely changed the world. Go watch that if you haven't seen it, because frankly not enough people have watched it. And then of course there's Project Cadmus from Justice League Unlimited, which tied together all the various science-based villains and brought them in under the control of the government, with the aim of defeating the Justice League. While the episode contains a couple of characters complaining that their tax money is being spent on shady organisations, it's interesting to note that they sidestepped the issue of governments acting immorally by revealing that Project Firestorm had been shut down years ago. We infer that it was because of the way they treated Volcana, or potentially because of the things they had her do, but the agents that ran the project refused to pull the plug and continued their work off the books, placing the blame squarely on the shoulders of Kurt and his men. The agents from Project Firestorm are all based on characters seen in Marvel Comics' spy agency S.H.I.E.L.D., with Nick Fury inspiring Kurt, with agents that look like Timothy Dum Dum Dugan, and normally I'd call him Dum Dum Duggan, but Marvel Ultimate Alliance pronounced his name as Dugan, so who am I to argue? Agents Gabriel Jones and Jasper Sitwell. It's also worth noting that the grunts that work within the facility wear uniforms that make them look like agents of AIM, also from Marvel Comics. And for fans of these comics, this look emphasises their villainy. I find it amusing how these wicked figures of authority are all represented by characters from DC's main competitors, although to me it feels more like a wink and a nudge reference rather than a real expression of disdain for Marvel. Project Firestorm was intended to take Volcana and turn her into a living weapon, assassinating high-priority targets, stealing assets, and so on. But this isn't the kind of life that she wanted to lead, so she broke free and intended to fade away into obscurity. Ultimately, she didn't like the things that she was made to do and felt let down by everyone that was supposed to have cared for her. Her parents, her educators, and her government. Unfortunately, she still needed money to live, and someone like her can't exactly get a regular job, especially if she's trying to hide. Instead, she had to steal to make ends meet. So it's fortunate then that she controlled one of the most intense elements on the planet, and could easily clear a room with but a thought. Superman is introduced to Volcana when she charms her way onto a yacht to rob an exhibit that is being displayed there. There's a very short scene where Jimmy Olsen creepily snaps a shot of Volcana for his private collection. Gross, Jimmy, that's so gross. And this angers Volcana. However, she maintains her composure and flirts with Jimmy a little bit, saying she hoped that he caught her good side. She did this to allow herself to get close enough to him to burn the film in his camera and destroy the evidence. Volcana clearly didn't want any sign of herself being there. It's also why she wears a large coat, a headscarf, and dark glasses. But I think that she also objects to being objectified by a stranger, especially a little dork like Jimmy Olsen. There is more to Volcana than the way she looks, but rather than speaking out and bringing attention to herself, she had to smile through her teeth until the unwanted attention went away, which I think is an experience lots of women can relate to. Now, that's not to say that Volcana doesn't benefit from her looks. She leans into it at times, using her charm to persuade a bouncer to let her into the yacht club without a ticket. While Volcana had been trained to weaponize her pyrokinetic abilities, she also weaponizes her sex appeal. She has a sultry voice and speaks very softly to most men, especially when she wants something. She could easily use her fire powers to get what she wants. Any normal person that got in her way could be turned to cinders without much effort. But that's not who she is. Or at least that's not who she wants to be. She'd rather use the power of persuasion, and I do think she does take some pleasure from being able to manipulate people with her words and a bat of her eyelids. But her powers are deemed to be too valuable to lose by Kurt, who tracks her down and traps her in his facility. She had been a valuable agent, but now a foreign government had offered to buy her so that they could dissect her to recreate her abilities. Fortunately, Superman deemed this to be completely unacceptable and he rescues Volcana. At the end of the episode, Superman takes her away and hides her on a tropical island. The fact that he has to bring her supplies suggests that it is deserted, or at the very least far enough away that you can't get access to regular food. It might seem like a punishment, and I suppose in a way it is. She's essentially being locked away from the rest of the world, and it just so happens to be a very beautiful prison. But Volcana has everything she wants: food, shelter, and the sun, and she genuinely seems to be happy, which makes it all the more disappointing when we briefly see her turn up in the Justice League episode Only a Dream Part 1, following a prison break. This suggests that Volcana either got bored of the island life and left of her own volition, or she was found and taken back to the US. When she escaped from prison, she paired up with another fire-themed villain, Firefly, who is utterly besotted with her, and of course it makes sense, he's a pyromaniac. She is literally his dream woman. Volcana, meanwhile, seems to be amused by his devotion, despite his obvious shortcomings. While they may have been a well-matched pair, the two weren't particularly smart, after they burnt out all of the oxygen from the construct cage Green Lantern held them in, and she was returned to her cell. Volcana made several background appearances as part of Gorilla Grodd's secret society during Justice League Unlimited, but she didn't have a speaking role. The only thing of note is that she was one of the few villains to escape being murdered by Darkseid. Outside of the DC animated universe, Volcana has appeared as one of Poison Ivy's inner circle, the Natural Disasters, after she took over the Legion of Doom in the Harley Quinn animated series. She has a very minor role in the show, and we don't ever hear about her backstory. She's just another elemental villain in Ivy's team. In the mainline comics, Volcana appeared in a single panel on a single page of Superman 80-Page Giant from 2010, but she's not a significant part of the story. She's not even identified by name. We don't even see her face, but we know it's her. More than anything, her appearance here is just a cameo that fans of the cartoon can point to and feel smug for recognizing. I can only imagine why she hasn't more formally made the leap to the mainline comics, perhaps because there's already a wealth of pyrokinetic characters with similar backstories, but it does seem like a wasted opportunity to cash in on some nostalgia. True, Volcana may not be the most significant DCAU original character, but she has connections to one of the most satisfying storylines, Project Cadmus in Justice League Unlimited. Project Firestorm was just one of many initiatives that the governments had in place to weaponize those that are different. And I think that her backstory shows what could have happened to Superman had he not been adopted by the Kents. A less scrupulous or less patient couple may very well have turned him over to the shadowy men in black at the first sign of trouble. To me, that's one of the main reasons why Superman takes such an interest in her, and in the first instance anyway, helps her escape, rather than sending her to a traditional prison for her crimes. She was the victim of society, even if the government decided to shut the program down. Her life was still completely upended, and her faith in her fellow man was completely shaken. As disappointing as it is to see that she left the island and returned to her villainous ways, that island was surrounded by water, her only weakness. It may have been a beautiful place, but it was still a prison. Okay, that's it for this week's essay. If you liked the video, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, leave a comment, tell all your friends about me. You know how YouTube works. If you really enjoyed the video and have the means, please consider making use of the thanks button to send a buck or two my way, because every little helps. I offer channel memberships for $1.99 a month. This will get you early access to my weekly video essay, priority responses to your comments, members-only videos, custom emojis, and an icon on your profile indicating that you're one of my people. And special thanks to my current channel members, who are all listed on the screen right now. Next time, I'm changing gears slightly in the lead up to Christmas. I want to talk about the Batman the Animated Series episode Deep Freeze because I'm feeling sentimental. This is a story about Mr. Freeze being reunited with his lost love and the terrible things he would be willing to do to potentially get her back. Perfect viewing for the holiday season, right? Hope to see you then.